You don't remember when it started, but you remember the moment you realized you weren't really living anymore. You were just getting through the day, waking up, doing what needed to be done, going back to sleep, and repeating it again. Not because you wanted to, because stopping wasn't an option. From the outside, nothing looks wrong. You show up, you function, you answer messages, you go to work, you do what life requires. But inside, there's a quiet exhaustion that never really leaves. Not the kind sleep fixes, not the kind a vacation solves. Something deeper, a tiredness that comes from existing itself. And if you've ever felt this, you probably struggle to explain it, because it isn't exactly depression. You don't necessarily want to die, but sometimes you feel like you wouldn't mind if everything just stopped for a while, not ending, just resting. And that difference matters more than most people understand, because people who feel tired of existing are often misunderstood. Others assume they're lazy, negative, ungrateful. But the truth is usually very different. Most of them aren't people who hate life. They're people who carry too much for too long without enough rest. And eventually something inside them slowed down, not dramatically, quietly, until existing itself began to feel heavy. For many people, this tiredness begins long before adulthood, not in one dramatic moment, but in small experiences that slowly shape the nervous system. Moments when emotions weren't understood, when problems had to be handled alone, when being strong became more important than being supported. Some people learned early that life meant effort, that rest had to be earned, that struggling quietly was normal. And over time, this creates a person who keeps going no matter what, responsible, reliable, resilient. But resilience has a cost, because the people who endure the most are often the ones who learn not to ask for help. They solve problems, they adapt, they push forward, and for years it works, until one day it doesn't, until effort no longer produces energy, until trying feels heavier than stopping, until even simple things begin to feel like too much. Showering feels like effort, answering messages feels like effort, making decisions feels like effort. Even things that once felt easy start to feel strangely distant. Not impossible, just exhausting. This is when many people begin to wonder what is wrong with them. But often nothing is wrong. Something is simply depleted. Psychologists sometimes describe this state as existential exhaustion, a fatigue that doesn't come from activity, but from awareness, from realizing how much effort life actually requires. Think about what it means to be a person. Every day you maintain yourself. You wake up, you move, you plan, you solve problems, you interact with people, you manage emotions, you make decisions, you carry responsibilities, and then the next day it starts again. For most people, this rhythm feels normal, but some people become intensely aware of it. They see the repetition, the maintenance, the constant effort required just to exist, and once you see that clearly, it becomes hard to ignore. Life can start to feel less like a journey and more like a system that never turns off, not necessarily painful, just endless. And that endlessness can feel incredibly heavy. Many people who feel tired of existing describe something else. They say life begins to feel like a performance, like they're playing a role they never chose, smiling when expected, responding when spoken to, doing what responsible adults are supposed to do. But inside there's distance, like watching yourself live instead of truly being present. Psychology sometimes calls this depersonalization, the feeling of being slightly disconnected from your own life, present, but not fully there. You go through the motions, you function, but everything feels muted, distant, like there's a thin layer between you and reality. And trying to break through that layer takes energy you don't have. So you keep moving quietly, doing what needs to be done, while hoping the feeling will pass. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. One of the hardest parts about this kind of exhaustion is how invisible it is. From the outside, quiet exhaustion looks like normal life. You still function, you still show up, you still look fine. So no one sees the effort it takes just to keep going. Every morning becomes a small negotiation. Get up or stay here a little longer. Move or stay still. Because life doesn't pause. Bills exist. Responsibilities exist. People need things from you. So you continue, not always living, sometimes just surviving. And over time, survival can begin to feel like the only mode available. There's something else that often develops in people who feel this way. A quiet form of learned helplessness. Not dramatic hopelessness. Something quieter. Many of them tried to make life better. They tried new goals, new routines, new plans. And sometimes things improved for a while. But eventually difficulties returned. Stress returned. Disappointment returned. And after enough cycles, something changes. Not consciously, but internally. Hope begins to feel expensive. Effort begins to feel uncertain. And the mind starts to conserve energy, not by giving up completely, but by lowering expectations. Existing becomes something you endure instead of something you chase. And strangely, that can feel safer, because expecting less hurts less. Trying less protects you from disappointment, but it also slowly drains meaning from life. Until eventually the question becomes quiet and simple. Not how do I live better, but how do I get through today? What makes this experience especially isolating is how difficult it is to talk about. If you say you're tired of existing, people get scared. They assume the worst. They think you want to disappear. But often that isn't true. Many exhausted people don't want to die. They want relief. They want rest. They want a moment where existence doesn't feel so heavy. But there isn't always language for that. So they stay quiet, they function, they keep going, and the exhaustion remains mostly invisible. What many people don't realize is that this kind of tiredness isn't weakness. It's often the result of caring too much for too long without enough recovery. Humans aren't designed for constant pressure, constant productivity, constant emotional effort. We need real rest, not just sleep, but mental rest, emotional rest, permission to exist without performing, without proving anything, without pushing forward every single day. And when that kind of rest is missing long enough, the system slows down, not to fail, but to survive. Because exhaustion is sometimes the mind's way of saying, this pace cannot continue forever. Healing from this kind of exhaustion rarely happens all at once. It doesn't come from forcing motivation, or pushing harder, or pretending everything is fine. Often it begins with something quieter. Recognition. Understanding that this experience has meaning. Understanding that exhaustion is not the same as failure. Understanding that needing rest does not mean you are broken. Sometimes the first shift happens when a person stops fighting their tiredness and starts listening to it instead. Because exhaustion is information. It tells you something has been too much for too long. And slowly, with time and support, that weight can begin to change. Not disappear overnight, but soften little by little until one day existing feels slightly lighter, not perfect, not effortless, but possible again. And sometimes that small difference is enough to get through another day, enough to take another breath, enough to remember that even people who feel tired of existing aren't empty. They're often people who felt deeply for a very long time. People who kept going when it would have been easier to stop. People who survived more than others ever noticed. And maybe being tired doesn't mean you've reached the end. Maybe it simply means you've been strong for too long without enough rest. And for now, resting where you are might be enough.